The circular room was quiet except for the soft hum of the air system. The light was a calm blue. This was a classroom on the Olympus Orbital University. The students here were the smartest from many different worlds. They sat in floating chairs that faced a large screen made of light at the front. On the screen was a picture of an old human village. The houses were made of mud and wood. People in simple clothes were working with basic tools. It was a lesson about societies that had not yet learned to travel to the stars. Professor Valcor stood to the side. He was not human. He was Iridian. He had soft, feathery skin on his head that moved slightly when he talked. His eyes were like those of a fly, made of many small parts, which let him see everything in the room at once. He was a kind and patient teacher. As we can see, the professor said, his voice calm, the pattern is very clear. Most species at this stage of development focus on community and simple technology. Their growth is slow. It is predictable. A young man named Jin sat near the middle of the room. He was from Earth. He had a confident look on his face, almost a smirk. He thought the lesson was boring. He believed humans were much more special than this. He saw the simple people on the screen and felt superior. He raised his hand. The professor nodded to him. Yes, Jin. Jin did not wait for a full invitation. He leaned forward and his chair creaked. Professor, with respect, I think this is why humans are different. He waved a hand at the screen. While other species were being slow and predictable, humans were building great empires. We were writing deep thoughts about life. We were creating art and music. We were already figuring out how to reach the stars when you found us. He looked around at the other students. Some were large and had thick skin like the Brivacs. Others were thin and graceful like the Thessalians. A few looked like they were made of rock. They were the geodes. Jin felt they were all weak compared to humans. Our fighting spirit, Jin continued, his voice getting louder. Our ruthlessness. Other species call it a bad thing. But it is not. It is what made us strong. It is the engine that pushed us forward. The Galactic Commonwealth did not find a group of simple farmers. They found a species that was about to kick the door down and come out into the galaxy on its own. A soft sound went through the room. Some of the alien students shifted in their seats. A few made low clicks or grunts that were signs of disagreement. They did not like Jin's proud words. Jin saw their reaction and liked it. He enjoyed making them uncomfortable. It proved his point. Then his eyes moved to another student. A young woman named Sumin was also from Earth. She always sat near the front but off to the side. She was quiet. While Jin talked, she was looking at a small flat computer in her hands, taking notes. Her face showed no emotion. She never joined in these arguments. She never boasted. Jin felt a sudden dislike for her calmness. He saw it as a challenge. He thought her quiet nature was a sign of weakness. He wanted to prove that his way, the loud and proud way, was the true human way. He pointed at her. The whole class turned to look. Look at Sumin, Jin said, his voice now sounding like he was making fun of her. She is quiet. She studies all the time. The galaxy probably thinks she is the better kind of human. The peaceful kind, he paused, letting his words hang in the air. But it is just an act, he said, his tone sharp. Under that calm face, she has the same basic instincts as the rest of us. The same fighting spirit. She just hides it. She does not have the courage to show it. True human strength is not about being quiet. It is about having the will to take what you want. To dominate. The room became completely silent. It was a direct attack. It was public. He had called her a coward in front of everyone. He had tried to tear down her quiet pride and replace it with his own loud version. Professor Valcor moved, his mouth opening to stop this personal fight. But he was too late. Sumin stopped typing on her small computer. She did not slam it down. She did not gasp. She simply stopped. Her fingers went still. Then very slowly she lifted her head. Her eyes, dark and calm, moved from her screen to Jin. Her face was a mask. It showed no anger, no hurt, no surprise. It was empty. She looked at him for a long moment. The silence in the room felt heavy, like a weight. Jin's confident smile began to fade under her stare. He expected her to yell. He expected her to argue back with emotion. He was ready for that. He knew how to fight that kind of battle, but she gave him nothing. Her silence was stronger than all his words. Finally, Sumin spoke. Her voice was low and clear. It did not shake. It did not rise in pitch. It was a flat, sharp sound that cut through the room. You are wrong, Jin, she said. You mistake noise for strength. You think being aggressive is the same as being smart? She stood up. She did not jump up in anger. She rose smoothly, with a quiet control that made her seem taller than she was. She picked up her small computer. You see the fist, she said, her eyes locked on his. But you are completely blind to the brain that tells the fist where to hit. She took a step toward the main light screen at the front of the class. The professor watched her, his multifaceted eyes wide with interest. He did not stop her. Jin could not say anything. He just watched her, his mouth slightly open. The attack in class was over. The counterattack was about to begin, and no one in the room knew what was coming. The silence in the lecture hall was absolute. It was the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. All eyes were fixed on Sumin as she walked to the front of the room. Her steps were not loud, but each one seemed to echo. The soft rustle of her clothes was the only sound. Jin sat frozen in his chair. His mind was racing, trying to understand what was happening. This was not the reaction he had planned for. He wanted a fight, a shouting match he knew he could win with his loud voice and strong opinions. He did not expect this cold, quiet walk to the main screen. He felt a small knot of worry form in his stomach. Sumin reached the large holographic projector. She did not look at Jin. She did not look at the professor. She tapped a few commands on her datapad. The image of the primitive human village vanished. In its place, a complex star map bloomed into life. Thousands of tiny lights representing stars and planets filled the space. Lines connected some of them, showing trade routes and borders. It was a map of this part of the galaxy. Professor Valcor watched, his feathery crests twitching with deep interest. He moved back to give her space. He was a scholar, and he recognized the start of a true debate. This was more interesting than any of his prepared lessons. Sumin finally turned to face the class. Her gaze was calm, but her words, when they came, were like shards of ice. Your analysis of humanity is childish, Jin, she said. Her voice was still low, but it carried to every corner of the room. You talk about our wars. You talk about our conquests. You are proud of these things. But you miss the most important point. You ignore our most powerful weapon. She paused, letting her eyes sweep over the alien students. They were leaning forward, their strange bodies tense. They were listening. You talk about ruthlessness, she continued, but you only understand one kind. The simple kind. The kind a wild animal understands. The true ruthlessness of humanity is not in our anger. It is in our patience. It is in our ability to understand our enemy so completely that we can defeat them without them ever seeing us coming. Jin found his voice. It was a weak sound, a protest. What are you talking about? Strength is strength. Winning a battle is winning a battle. Sumin gave him a look that was almost pitying. Is it you break a door down by hitting it? That is one way. It is loud, it is obvious. It takes a lot of energy. But if you spend time learning how the lock works, you can open the door with a whisper. It is silent. It is efficient. Which method is more clever? Which one shows more control? She did not wait for his answer. She turned back to the star map. Her fingers flew over her datapad. The map zoomed in rapidly. It focused on a sector of space marked with red and yellow symbols. The symbols showed conflict. The words Thessalian unification appeared at the top of the screen in clear, common script. Many of the students shifted. The Thessalian students, slender and graceful, sat up straighter. This was their history. The Thessalian unification, Sumin stated, 70 standard years ago. The two main factions on the planet Thessalia had been at war for a generation. The Galactic Commonwealth decided to step in. They sent their fleet. Great powerful warships filled the sky above Thessalia. On the screen, images of sleek silver warships appeared. They were impressive. They were the symbol of the galaxy's united strength. The fleet's goal was peace, Sumin explained. Their method was force. They bombed military bases. They blocked supply lines. They demanded that the two sides stop fighting. They saw the conflict as a simple problem. There was side A and side B. The solution was to force them to shake hands. She looked at Jin. This is your kind of thinking, Jin. See a problem? Hit it, be loud. Be strong. Jin scowled but said nothing. The galactic fleet failed, Sumin said flatly. The words hung in the air. For 10 years they failed. The war did not end. The people of Thessalia kept suffering. The fleet's show of strength only made the two sides angrier. They found new ways to fight. They saw the fleet as just another enemy to resist. She zoomed the map in further until it showed the surface of Thessalia. The continents were marked with the colors of the two warring factions. Then, she highlighted a third area, a small, mountainous region that had been gray and unmarked before. She colored it blue. The galaxy only saw two sides, Sumin said. Humanity looked closer. We saw a third group. They were not part of the two main factions. They were a collection of smaller tribes and clans living in the high mountains. They were ignored by everyone. The war was happening in the cities and the plains below them. They were just trying to survive. On her datapad, she brought up old images. They showed human men and women in simple clothes, not uniforms. They were living in Thessalian mountain villages. They were sharing meals. They were helping to build shelters. They were listening to old storytellers. The Commonwealth sent soldiers. Humanity sent anthropologists. We sent cultural experts and language learners. We did not go there to give orders or to fight. We went there to listen. We lived with these mountain people for years. We learned their language. We learned their stories. We learned what they wanted, what they feared, and what they dreamed of. One of the Thessalian students, a female named Elia, spoke up, her voice thin with confusion. The mountain clans, they were simple people. They had no power. They were not part of the war. That is what everyone thought, Sumin agreed. And that was their greatest strength. They were invisible, but they were suffering. The war was destroying the planet's environment. Their water was being poisoned. Their hunting grounds were becoming battlefields. They had a reason to want the war to end, a reason just as strong as the two main factions. They just had no way to do anything about it. She looked back at Jin. His face was puzzled. He did not see the connection. He did not understand how helping simple villagers could be ruthless. So we gave them away, Sumin said, and her voice took on a harder edge. This is the part your history lessons probably do not show you, Elia. This is the part the galaxy calls the humanitarian miracle. It was not a miracle. It was a calculated surgical strike. The star map changed again. Now it showed complex lines of data, supply routes, communication networks, all belonging to the two main warring factions. The mountain clans knew the land better than anyone. They knew secret paths. They knew hidden valleys. We did not give them weapons. We did not need to. We gave them information. Precise, perfect information. She pointed to a supply route on the screen. We told them exactly where and when a key supply convoy for the northern faction would be most vulnerable. We told them which small bridge to collapse. Not to destroy the convoy, but to delay it for 3 days. She pointed to a communication tower. We showed them a hidden cable that connected the southern faction's command center to their front lines. We told them how to cut it for just 48 hours. We did not teach them to fight, she repeated, her voice cold and clear. We taught them to be a nuisance. A precise, devastating nuisance. We helped them create chaos. Not the chaos of bombs, but the chaos of silence, of hunger, of confusion. On the screen, the blue area representing the mountain clans began to send out dozens of small, flickering lines. Each line touched a weak point in the red and yellow networks. The two large factions who had been focused on each other and the big galactic fleet in the sky suddenly had 1,000 small problems appearing in their backyard. Within 6 months, Sumin said, the two main factions were exhausted. Their supplies were unreliable. Their orders were not getting through. Their soldiers were frustrated. And all the while, this small third group was growing stronger and more organized. They became a real political power, not just a group of villagers. She brought up the final image, a treaty document. It was signed by 3 parties, the northern faction, the southern faction, and the newly formed United Mountain Clans. The war ended, not because one side was bombed into surrender, but because a new side was created that forced everyone to talk. The tripartite peace treaty has held for 70 years. The galaxy praised humanity for its wisdom and compassion. Sumin finally fell silent. She looked away from the screen and directly at Jin. Her expression was blank, but her eyes were like dark ice. They called it compassion, she said softly. But tell me, Jin, was it compassion to use a peaceful people as a weapon? Was it kindness to study their culture for years, not for knowledge, but to find the perfect way to use them? To break a war we had no stake in? We understood both sides so well that we found a third way to break them both. We ended a war that the entire galactic fleet could not. We did it without firing a single shot from our own ships. She took a step toward him. You call that weak? You call that a lack of courage? I call that a ruthlessness you cannot even dream of. You want to break down the door. I would rather convince the door to open itself for me, and then lock it behind my enemy. The silence in the classroom was heavy and thick. It was the kind of silence that comes after a loud explosion. The students were not moving. They were all looking at Sumin. Her story had changed the room. The air felt different. Jin sat completely still. His face had lost all its color. He looked like a man who had been hit in the stomach. His mouth was slightly open, but no sound came out. His mind was trying to understand what he had just heard. He had always believed that strength was about ships and guns and loud speeches. He thought being ruthless meant being the first to shoot. Sumin had shown him a different world, a world where ruthlessness was quiet, a world where the strongest weapon was not a laser but an idea, a world where you could win a war by talking to villagers in the mountains. This new idea was too big for his mind. It would not fit inside his old thoughts. The alien students were also stunned. The Brivacs, a large species with thick skin, looked at Sumin with a new respect. They understood physical strength, but this was a kind of power they had never considered. It was clever. It was deep. It was scary. The slender Thessalian students were the most affected. Alia, the one who had spoken, had tears in her large eyes. They were not tears of sadness. They were tears of shock. The history of her world, the story she had learned as a child, was suddenly different. The humanitarian miracle was not a simple story of good humans helping. It was a complex story of a calculated plan. The humans had not been simple heroes. They had been players. They had moved pieces on a board no one else could see. Professor Valcor broke the silence. His voice was soft, but it carried through the room. He was a scholar, and his job was to seek truth. That is a very compelling case study, Miss Sumin, he said. His feathery crests were twitching rapidly, showing his great interest. You have presented facts that are not well known. You frame this human action not as compassion, but as a kind of strategic manipulation. He walked a little closer to her, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the star map. You say this is a deeper form of ruthlessness. But you use the word empathy. You say you understood the mountain clans. You learned their dreams. Is it not a contradiction to use understanding as a weapon? Is that not a betrayal of that very understanding? Sumin turned her calm gaze to the professor. She appreciated his question. It was a smart question. It was the heart of the matter. It is not a contradiction, Professor, she replied. Her voice was still even and clear. It is the essence of it. Jin believes that being ruthless means you cannot care. He is wrong. To be truly ruthless, you must care very much. You must care enough to learn everything about your target. She looked out at the class again. She wanted them all to understand. Think of a doctor, she said. A doctor must understand how the body works. He must know about the heart, the blood, the bones. He must have empathy for the human body. Why? So he can fix it when it is sick. But that same knowledge, she paused, letting the idea hang in the air. That same knowledge allows a different person to be a perfect assassin. The assassin knows exactly where to cut. He knows which poison will stop the heart. He uses his deep understanding to cause harm in the most efficient way possible. She let that dark idea settle in the room. Jin's way is like a wild man with a club, she continued. He swings the club and hopes he breaks something important. It is messy. It is wasteful. My way, the human way I am describing, is like the assassin's knife. It is clean. It is quiet. It does one precise thing and the whole system fails. She turned her eyes back to Jin. He flinched under her gaze. You wanted to see the human spirit, Jin? You wanted to see our ruthless engine? There it is. It is not the club. It is the mind that guides the knife. The instinct to watch, to learn, to wait, to understand a person or a culture so completely that you can find the one thing that will make it fall apart. You attack the body. I attack the soul. You try to break their ships. I try to break their will to fly them. One of the geodes, a student made of living rock, made a low grinding sound. It was their way of asking a question. This understanding, this patience, it is not only for war. Its voice was like two stones rubbing together. Sumin almost smiled. It was a small, cold movement of her lips. No, it is not. It is for everything. It is how humanity does business. It is how we make treaties. It is how we explore. We learn first. We always learn first. We learn what you value. We learn what you fear. We learn what you love. Then we know how to talk to you. We know what to offer. We know what to threaten. She looked at the Thessalian students. Your people make the most beautiful music in the galaxy. You value art above all else. So when humanity wanted to establish a trade route through your space, we did not send our fleet. We sent our best musicians. We spent years learning your music. We composed a symphony just for you. You were so moved by our understanding of your culture that you granted us everything we asked for. Was that a friendly gesture? Or was it the most clever trade negotiation in history? Elia the Thessalian stared at her. The truth was dawning on her face. It was both beautiful and terrifying. That is true, Elia whispered. The Symphony of the Twin Suns. It is our most cherished piece of alien art. It showed a deep love for our world. It showed a deep study of your world, Suman corrected gently. The result was the same. We got the trade route. You got a song you love. Everyone is happy. But which of us was more clever in that exchange? You opened your door because you felt we understood you. And we did understand you. We understood that the way to your door was not through force but through a song. She looked back at Jin. He had started to sweat. This is what you do not see, Suman said to him, her voice final. You are the wild man with the club. You are what the galaxy expects. They build strong doors to stop you. They have shields and weapons ready for you. They are prepared for the human who attacks in class. She took a single step forward. It was not a threatening step. It was a step of certainty. They are not prepared for me. They are not prepared for the human who sits quietly, the human who learns their language, the human who memorizes their customs, the human who knows their history better than they do. They will open the door for me themselves, and they will never see the knife until it is too late. She did not need to say anything else. The lesson was over. The counterattack was complete. Jin was not just defeated, he was dismantled. His whole idea of what it meant to be strong and human lay in pieces around his chair. The class continued to sit in silence. They were not looking at Jin anymore. All their attention was on Sumin. They saw a new kind of human. They saw a new kind of danger. And they understood in that moment why a species from a simple world of mud and huts had earned a place among the stars. It was not because they were loud. It was because they were deep. The bell that marked the end of the class period was a soft chime. Normally it was followed by the immediate rustle of movement, the sound of chairs and the low buzz of conversation. Today there was nothing. The chime faded into the heavy silence, and for a long moment no one moved. The students were still processing what they had heard. Suman's words had painted a new picture of humanity, and they were all trying to understand it. The image of the loud, aggressive human represented by Jin was familiar. It was easy to understand. It was a simple kind of danger. The image Suman presented was different. It was a quiet, patient danger. It was the kind of danger you did not see until it was too late. It was more frightening because it was so clever. Professor Valcor was the first to break the spell. He cleared his throat, a soft, rasping sound. Well, he said. His voice was thoughtful. That was an exceptional addition to our lesson. Thank you, Suman. You have given everyone here a great deal to think about. He looked at the class. You are all dismissed. His words were like a signal. The room slowly came back to life. The alien students began to gather their things. They moved slowly, quietly. They were not talking to each other. They were lost in their own thoughts. Many of them glanced at Sumin as they stood up. Their looks were not of fear, but of a deep new respect. They looked at her the way you might look at a master chess player or a great artist. Jin did not move. He sat in his chair, staring at the empty space where the star map had been. His face was pale. His hands were resting on his desk, and they were clenched into tight fists. He was not angry. The hot, burning anger he was used to feeling was gone. In its place was a cold, hollow feeling. It was the feeling of being completely and utterly wrong. He had been so sure of himself. He had built his whole identity on being the strong, proud human. He believed that humanity's power was in its ability to dominate, to conquer, to be the loudest voice in the room. He had attacked Sumin to prove that his way was the only true way. But she had not just argued with him. She had not just defended herself. She had taken his simple idea of strength and shattered it. She had shown him that real power was not in the fist, but in the mind that guided the fist. She had shown him that true ruthlessness was not about destruction, but about control. Perfect, absolute control. One by one, the other students filed out of the room. The large Brivac student gave a low, respectful grunt in Sumin's direction as he passed. The Thessalians, including Elia, bowed their heads to her in a gesture of deep thanks and acknowledgement. They were not thanking her for being kind. They were thanking her for showing them the truth, even if it was a hard truth. Sumin did not seem to notice the attention. She was calmly putting her datapad into her bag. She moved with the same quiet efficiency as always. There was no pride on her face, no satisfaction. She had simply stated facts. The lesson was over, and it was time to go. Finally, Jin was alone with her and the professor. The professor was gathering his own notes, giving them space. He was a wise teacher, and he knew that some lessons happened after the class was dismissed. Sumin slung her bag over her shoulder and turned to leave. Her path would take her right past Jin's chair. As she walked, her footsteps were soft on the floor. Jin could hear them getting closer. He knew he had to say something. He could not let her just walk away. He had to acknowledge what had happened. He forced himself to look up. Her face was calm. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the door. "Sumin," he said. His voice was rough. It was barely a whisper. It cracked on her name. She stopped. She turned her head and looked down at him. Her eyes were dark and calm. They held no anger. They held no gloating. They were just empty. It was the most frightening look he had ever seen. He tried to find the right words. I didn't know," he managed to say. It was a weak, pathetic statement, but it was all he had. Sumin looked at him for a long moment. She seemed to be considering him, the way a scientist considers a simple organism under a microscope. "That's the point, Jin," she said. Her voice was flat. It was not unkind. It was just a fact. "You weren't supposed to know." She took a small step closer to his chair. He felt himself shrink back. "The galaxy is full of species that are stronger than us," she explained, her tone patient as if she was talking to a child. "They are faster. They have better technology. They have seen 1,000,000 species that are loud and aggressive. They know how to build walls against that. They are prepared for the human who attacks in class. They are ready for you." She paused, letting him feel the weight of that truth. He was predictable. He was expected. He was not a threat. He was a nuisance. Then she offered him a small, cold smile. It did not reach her eyes. "They are not prepared for me." With those final words, she turned away. She walked toward the door, her back straight and her steps sure. She did not look back. Jin watched her go. He watched the door slide shut behind her. The classroom was silent again. The hollow feeling inside him grew. He understood now. He had been playing a simple game, and he thought he was winning. Sumin had shown him that they were not even on the same board. Professor Valcor walked over and placed a gentle, 3-fingered hand on Jin's shoulder. "A difficult lesson, Jin," the professor said softly, "but a valuable one. It is often the quietest water that is the deepest." Jin just nodded. He could not speak. He was thinking about Sumin's words. He was thinking about the assassin's knife. He was thinking about the symphony of the twin suns. He was thinking about a door opening by itself and then locking behind him. He had learned more about humanity in one class than he had in his entire life, and he was terrified of what he had learned. The news of what happened in Xenobiology 401 moved through the Olympus Orbital University like a quiet current. It was not a loud story. There was no shouting or fighting to report. But the students who had been there carried the weight of the lesson with them. They told their friends in hushed voices in the dining halls. They discussed it in small groups in the library. The story changed how they saw the human students. Before, humans were known for being loud, ambitious, and sometimes difficult. They were like a bright, sharp light, easy to see, easy to avoid if you did not want to be blinded. Now the other species started to see a shadow behind that light. They saw a depth they had not noticed. They began to understand that the loud humans were only one part of the story. The quiet humans, the ones who mostly watched and listened, were the other part. And they were perhaps the more important part. In the days that followed, Jin was a changed person. He walked through the wide, bright hallways of the university with his shoulders slumped. He did not look at other students. He kept his eyes on the floor. The proud, arrogant young man was gone. In his place was someone who was thinking, deeply and painfully. He could not stop thinking about Sumin's words. He replayed the entire class in his mind over and over. He saw her calm face. He heard her quiet voice explaining how she would break a war without firing a shot. He thought about the idea of using understanding as a weapon. It was a terrifying idea. It meant that you could never really trust a friendly gesture. It meant that a kind word could be a strategy. It meant that the song you loved might have been composed for a secret reason. The universe suddenly seemed a much more complicated and dangerous place. He saw Sumin a few times from a distance. She was always alone. She was always calm. She would be sitting in the garden level, looking at the stars beyond the dome, or she would be reading a book in a corner of the common room. She did not seem to notice the new way people looked at her. She did not seem to care. One afternoon, Jin was in the history section of the library. He was trying to read about the Thessalian unification. He wanted to see the facts for himself. He found the official records. They praised the galactic fleet for their persistence. They praised humanity for their compassionate intervention. It was just as Sumin had said. The records were a surface story. They did not talk about the mountain clans being used as a weapon. They did not talk about the calculated manipulation. He looked up from his screen and saw her. Sumin was at a table on the other side of the room. She was reading a thick book about geode mineral poetry. Her face was peaceful. She was absorbed in her study. He watched her for a long time. He thought about walking over. He thought about apologizing again. He thought about asking her more questions. But he did not. He was afraid. He was not afraid that she would be angry. He was afraid that she would look at him with those calm, empty eyes and see right through him. He was afraid she would find the one thing that would make him fall apart. He finally understood the true meaning of her ruthlessness. It was not about causing pain. It was about the power of knowledge. She had known exactly what to say to break his worldview. She had known his weakness was his pride, and she had targeted it with the precision of a surgeon. A few weeks later, there was a university-wide debate. The topic was the ethics of first contact with pre-FTL societies. A Brevac student was arguing for a strong, guiding hand. We must protect them from their own violent instincts, the student boomed. A human student stood up to respond. It was a young man Jin knew. He was usually loud and opinionated, just like Jin used to be. He started to talk about human strength and how it could be used to shape younger civilizations. But then he stopped. He looked into the crowd and his eyes found Sumin. She was sitting in the back, watching silently. He also looked at Jin, who was sitting near the front. The young man paused. He took a breath. Actually, he said, his voice becoming quieter, the question is not about our strength. The question is about our understanding. Before we decide to guide them, we must first be sure we are not simply using them. He sat down. His speech was not finished. But he had said something more important than he had planned. The room was quiet for a moment. Then there was a soft murmur of agreement. The idea was spreading. Jin left the debate early. He went to the observation deck. It was a large, quiet room with a clear view of the stars. The galaxy was spread out before him. Billions of stars, countless worlds. He had always seen it as a place to be conquered, a challenge to be won. Now he saw it differently. He saw it as a place of infinite complexity, a place where the strongest power was not a warship, but a secret, a hidden weakness, a story that could be told in just the right way. He thought about Earth. He thought about the simple people in the mud huts from the professor's lesson. How had they gotten from there to here? He used to think it was through fire and steel. Now he wondered, how many doors had they convinced to open themselves? How many songs had they composed to get a trade route? How many mountain clans had they studied to end a war? Sumin had not been talking about herself alone. She had been talking about all of humanity. She had been explaining the hidden engine of human history. He finally understood the HFY, humanity, fuck yeah, feeling that his online friends talked about. But it was not the feeling he thought it was. It was not a proud shout. It was a quiet, cold certainty. A knowledge that humans could play a game no one else even knew was being played. It was not about being the strongest. It was about being the most clever, the most patient, the most understanding, and therefore the most ruthless. He saw a reflection in the thick glass of the observation window. Sumin was standing there a few meters away. She had also come to look at the stars. She did not look at him. She just looked out at the infinite darkness. He knew then that she had won more than just an argument in class. She had changed him. She had forced him to see the world as it was, not as he wanted it to be. She had counterattacked his ignorance with a truth so sharp it had cut his pride away. He was not the same person he was before. He was quieter. He was more thoughtful. He was in a way more dangerous. Because he was starting to learn, he looked at Sumin's reflection one more time. Then he turned and walked away, leaving her alone with the stars. The lesson was over. The class had ended. But the learning had just begun. For him and for everyone who had been in the room that day, the universe would never look the same again.